Welcome to Sparks of History, where Jewish history and world history meet. We are very honored and pleased to have with us today Rabbi Elliot Mathias. Rabbi Mathias serves as Aish HaTorah's Chief Operating Officer for Global Activities, as well as Executive Director of Aish HaTorah in New York. Rabbi Mathias is the founder of Hasbara Fellowships, a premier campus Israel advocacy organization in North America, which trains and supports thousands of students to stand up for Israel. Rabbi Mathias graduated from Northwestern University with a degree in communications and received his rabbinical ordination smicha from Yeshiva Aish HaTorah in Jerusalem. Rabbi Mathias, thank you for being with us. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited.
Okay. Starting off, what exactly is the Hasbara Fellowships program? How has it made an impact on college campuses? And is there a difference pre-October 7th and post-October 7th?
Sure. So the Hasbara Fellowships program was a program started actually by Aish, which the idea was, and really, we see what's going on campuses now post-October 7th. This is not new. This has been happening really for decades. Even really it started in the early 80s after Israel went into Lebanon to try to get rid of the PLO in Lebanon. Already back then in the 80s, we were seeing protests on campus against the Israeli atrocities and the Israeli occupation. But I got involved in the early 2000s. So when the Intifada, quote unquote, started in 2000, and there was an eruption on college campuses protesting Israel. Probably not as intense as we've seen it over this last few months, but it was happening. Students dressing up on campus as Israeli soldiers and not letting students pass by certain, like creating blockades on campus saying, this is what Israeli soldiers do, in Israel, and mock chalkings of Palestinian babies on the middle of the quad, and really an attempt to try to use propaganda to educate or brainwash, whatever it might be, young people who knew very little about what was going on in the Middle East to try to get them to hate Israel. So the Hasbara Fellowships was started to educate and train college students, bring them to Israel, the ones who really wanted to make a difference, bring them to Israel, give them the hands-on, literally seeing what's happening on the ground, and then giving them the tools to go back to their campus to educate their peers about what's really happening in Israel. And then we built a whole staff across the country to then support these students when they go back. Since that time, we've trained about 4,000 students on campuses, and we work on campuses all over North America. Like I said, since October 7th, it's gone to a whole new level. And I think especially this past semester, where we saw that, the Israel haters, the anti-Israel actors, listen, to give them credit, they're incredibly organized. There was actually footage found at Emory University. It was overhead footage of students there literally training and practicing of how to set up an encampment on campus and how to block it off arm in arm so that people couldn't come through. They were literally training to do this. It's eerie, when you think about, terrorist training in the Middle East. So it's gotten very intense for Jewish students. It's not on every campus, but there's something going on almost every campus. Generally, the more elite campuses, the more liberal campuses, the campuses that are more in cities, because then you bring in other bad actors from those cities. So in New York City, in Washington, D.C., in Chicago, in Boston, in San Francisco, there's just an intensity that the Jewish students it's not, you send your kid to school, not what you're expecting to have to deal with.
Okay. So obviously the Hasbara Fellowships was aimed to provide a solution to something that was lacking. Is it that Jewish college students are simply not prepared to advocate on issues related, whether it's anti-Semitism or Israel? Is it something that is a result of pre-college education or lack thereof?
It definitely is, but take a step back. You're a 16-year-old kid. Maybe you go to Jewish day school, maybe you go to public school, but your parent, your family is connected to Jewish things. We don't, as the Jewish community in America, right? At least maybe now it's changing a little bit. I think it is changing since October 7th, but our identity was not, I have to be the defender of the Jewish people, in my college campus, in my environment. I have to be the one who's representing the Jewish people, representing Israel. We're Jews who, as we know in the Jewish community in America, some care more about their Judaism, some care less. Some are more identified, some are less identified. But even the ones that are very identified, the ones that are proud, no one ever came and said, okay, you are the ones who are going to represent the Jewish people in Israel on college campuses. And so in my experience in the last 20 plus years working with students who are deciding to take that and become the advocates for Israel, it blows me away that they do it, that they are choosing to do it. And so that's number one. Yes, there is a lack of education. There's a lack of focus on it, but I think it mainly just becomes because it's just, who says this is supposed to be the responsibility, of these kids going into college campuses? That's number one. I think the other thing is that there's no doubt about it that the American Jewish community in some ways, it's become soft. And by the way, this is Jewish history, right? All you have to do is open up the Tanakh, right? And we know that we see the cycles of Jews that we become fat, right? We become corpulent. And all of a sudden, what would the Jews? They started worshiping idols. They started getting soft. Hashem would have to come and, give them a potch, with whatever it would be. And they would have to all of a sudden fight a war and become strong again. You go through these cycles, and American Jewry has been very comfortable. They've been very successful. They haven't had to deal with these issues, and they haven't been prepared for it. And this has been, I think, a big eye opener. Again, I think this is in some of us have been screaming for the last 20, 25 years that this is going on. But I think now the response that we've seen from the Jewish community since October 7th is really unprecedented.
And what has been the response? We know that the Jewish community has given and raised $1 billion for Israel, heightened awareness. What is the response, and what else needs to be done?
Well, first, one of the responses that I think has been unprecedented is really the individual Jews or groups of Jews with real influence for the first time have gotten involved in this issue. For 25 years, when I started Hasbara Fellowships, we're a nonprofit. We have a lot of supporters, very wealthy, passionate Jews who care deeply about this issue. And their solution to the issue was write a check. Elliot, you go train those kids. Great, give you a pat on the back, and you'll go do it. And for some of us, I've been saying for years, but very nice, thank you, of course. But you're also writing $1 million check to the University of Pennsylvania, and you're writing $1 million check to Harvard University, and you have the ability, much more than a 19-year-old college student, to actually deal with this issue. And for the first time in my experience, what we've seen over the last, since October 7th, is very influential Jews in America taking a stand. And it's really, I believe, a handful of them, people like Mark Rowan and David Magerman, and there's a few others like that, Bill Ackman, who I think have made a huge difference. And that is then trickled down, I think, where now many Jewish organizations now feel more empowered, right? Because they see these Jews are taking a stand against universities, so they feel they can do something. The students on campus feel more empowered because they're not alone. And they see that there's people of influence who are coming and standing up for them. And they're going to the chancellors and are going to members of Congress and are dealing with this issue. So to me, that's been the biggest change. And, there's obviously, we could talk about, the state of American Jewry and, how long is this going to last? And where are we in the cycle of the diaspora? And all these things are interesting. But I think from what I've seen for the first time is that many Jews feel much more empowered to stand up against the hate. It might be too late. We're seeing that there's a lot of groundswell against us, but I think that's what has happened and what needs to happen more is that we have to realize we have to stand up for ourselves from top to bottom. We can't just rely on these 18, 19, 20-year-old kids to do it on campus. It has to be a full community effort.
When speaking to people from the States, here in Israel, sometimes we hear mixed messages. Yes, the situation is serious. Yes, there's an alarming rise in anti-Semitism. Yes, as you pointed out, some of the college campuses are hotbeds for anti-Israel demonstrations, encampments, and all that. But on the other hand, they also say that they hear a lot of support from regular Americans constantly. What's the picture? Like, how do you balance this? Like, how would you describe it?
I think what you described is very accurate. I mean, listen, polls show, and there's been a lot of polls done, where even a surprisingly number of non-Jews in America say that there is a real crisis of anti-Semitism going on. And polls showing even of course right after October 7th, but even since Israel's response has been so criticized all over the world and in the media, support for Israel in America is strong. And still the vast majority of Americans support Israel. But I think there's two issues. First of all, is that when you start to look at that support amongst younger people, the numbers start to dwindle. And at best, there's an even-handedness between Israel and their enemies. They're both wrong, they're both right, or at least the numbers start to even out a little bit more. So that means, number one, young people who are on college campuses or even younger than that, and we hear this going on in public high schools, they're taking the brunt of it because it could be, a 60-year-old in America, their social circles are still supportive of Israel, and maybe even for a 40-year-old. But once you go on the college campuses and you go younger, because those numbers are different, that's where they're really getting the brunt of it. And there's a fear that this is the next generation. These are the next generation of leaders. You look at what's happening in Congress today, with the squad and the sort of, the extreme left. This really didn't exist 10 years ago. And they are a minority, and they're not in power, and they haven't been able to really push forward their policies, but they have a voice and they're gaining followers. And so I think there's a nervousness that this is gaining traction and it might just get worse.
Jewish educators are reporting, as you've mentioned, an increased level of interest among Jewish college students in Judaism. Perhaps this is more than just among college students. Are you seeing this at Aish HaTorah in New York? How is it being manifested? And how do you navigate the Jewish issues and the Israel issues? Is support for Israel a way to get people interested in their Jewish identity and their roots, or is it so connected that it's one parcel, one package?
It's a fascinating topic, and I think it's changed and pretty rapidly because even as you're asking the question, I'm even thinking back, again, 25 years ago when we started Hasbara Fellowships, a lot of people ask, why is Aish getting involved with, pro-Israel advocacy and getting involved with, more political type of things on campus? That's not naturally what Aish was involved with. Aish was involved with outreach and Jewish education, and it was interesting. So when we started Hasbara Fellowships, I was actually a student at Aish. And I had been there for a few years studying, and it was a long story, but basically my brother was a student at University of Wisconsin, and he started telling me about the anti-Israel advocacy propaganda that was happening there. And it was a long story, but basically a few people at Aish got a meeting with the Foreign Ministry of Israel. And again, this was in 2001. And we were involved with some different things, educating people about Israel, different projects, and we went to meet with them to see how we could be more helpful. And they said to us, listen, the number one issue is on college campuses. And if you can come up with some sort of solution or project to deal with what's going on campuses, we're all ears. And Aish already for many years, pre-birthright, have been very involved in bringing college students to Israel, and bringing them on tours and giving them Jewish education. And that was one of our sort of flagship activities that we would do. And so we had this idea of, why don't we take this infrastructure and this idea of bringing students, and like I said, bring them to Israel, but train them to do Israel advocacy. And I remember I was sitting in the office of the foreign ministry with this foreign ministry, bureaucrat, but it was someone high up who could make decisions. And they had basically said to us, we gave them this idea to do this Hasbara Fellowships, and they decided they were going to give us a grant to start the program. And I remember I was sitting there with him, and it was like, something comes out of your mouth. You almost like you wish you would have caught it before it came out. And I said to him, and the foreign ministry is known. First of all, they're generally to the left politically. They're generally very secular. This is not a religious bastion, of Israel. And here we are, Aish HaTorah, this Orthodox organization. We're not into politics, but I think people sort of know where we are on the spectrum. And I said to him, why are you doing this with us? Right? There's a lot of organizations that you could be working with to do this. Why are you doing this with Aish? And without missing a beat, this left-wing, secular, Israeli diplomat or bureaucrat said to me, because we recognize that if Jews don't care about being Jewish, how can we expect them to stand up for Israel? And that's what you do. You help Jews realize that it's important to be Jewish. So the two go completely together. And he was right, 100%. And I think what we saw over the years are, I don't even know the exact numbers, but it's for sure hundreds, and that came through our program and really became much more inspired Jewishly because they were standing up for Israel. And because of partially we pushed them saying like, why are we doing this, right? We can give you the training of what to do, but really it's about why are we doing it? And by the way, that's part of the training because the other side is really clear about their why. They know exactly why they're doing it. They want to get rid of us. So our why has to be just as strong, if not stronger. And that's how we really sort of built up their Jewish connection. And we saw many got involved that way. So I would say 25 years ago, maybe before that, the connection, Israel was an integral part of Jewish identity. And it was a way to spark the Jewish identity for so many Jews who maybe that was the one thing they still felt connected to as Israel. Things changed over the last 10 years or so, where I hate to say it, but I think we started to see that Israel became, I don't even like to say these words, but it became more of a liability than an asset. And that for so many young Jews, because they, at best, were skeptical about Israel, were not sure what to think about Israel, were surrounded by people telling them that Israel was doing all these terrible things and it wasn't the in thing to support Israel. For many years, we really took a strategy of separating the two and not really going there, not really talking about Israel so much, and just finding other avenues to connect Jews to their Jewish identity. And again, is that through, holidays? Is it through philosophy? Is it through Shabbos, meals, whatever it might be? We even started for many years doing trips to other places, to England, to South America, to South Africa, because why would I want to go to Israel? As a 19, 20-year-old kid, it wasn't appealing to them. I think something changed after October 7th, where I don't know the exact numbers, even though there has been some surveys and studies done about this in the even in the secular Jewish world, the Federation, they've been doing some of it. And there's no doubt about, first of all, that the data shows it, but anecdotally, we've seen that a huge swath of Jews who I'm not talking about the extreme anti-Israel Jews, the ones who are in Jewish Voices for Peace, and I'm not talking about them, but that big swath of sort of like left of center, that middle group of Jews who don't hate Israel, but they just, again, like I said, they had a lot of doubts about it, a lot of it just wasn't something important to them. Something changed after October 7th. And I think it's not even what happened on October 7th. It was the response to October 7th. And when they saw that literally on October 7th, or certainly the day after, that there were these such extreme, hateful, violent protests against Israel, who just got attacked, that they felt that it was an attack on them. And their feeling of just seeing that there was just no empathy, for the Jewish people, and them seeing often in many of their circles, even while they might not have felt tied to Israel, their peers saw them as the representatives of Israel and saw them as, you're all Jews, you're all in the same boat. And I think that we've seen it. One of the things I do work with Aish in New York. I also work with all of our online team, aish.com, and on social media. Our numbers skyrocketed through the roof. And we're regularly getting, we actually have something on aish.com, which is a live chat where we have rabbis who people come to the website, can come and ask questions, and we then try to engage them. And if possible, try to connect them to local, organizations or educational opportunities wherever they live. And our numbers have been triple-fold of people that are coming, and we're asking them the questions like, has this been a reaction to what's going on? And we're seeing that it's been a huge impetus for Jews to really say, listen, something's going on here. Something's going on here, and they're turning to try to want to learn more.
Israel always gets this knock, right? Israel, and unfortunately, it's the it's the name of the organization that you set up. Israel is terrible at Hasbara. Okay, that's always the knock. Is that really true? I mean, if I'm just looking at one program here, thousands of students trained, advocates, and I'm sure there are other programs, like that, and other organizations that are involved in that. Is that a real knock on the Israeli government? Is that what it is? Or is it because there's not enough resources, there's not enough appreciation of its importance?
I think it's a few factors. First of all, I think, and I've had some of these discussions with people in the Israeli government, and again, there's different viewpoints even within the Israeli government, right? And there's people who advocate different ways. So it's not monolithic, but many people, and I think maybe rightfully, feel that while Hasbara and public opinion is important, Israel's security and what they have to do comes first. And you do hear this often from Israeli officials. Listen, they're going to criticize us no matter what. No matter whatever we do, we are going to be demonized and we're going to be delegitimized, and the UN is going to pass motions against us. So we might as well just do what we need to do and not worry about it. And I think that is partially an attitude that many Israelis have, and many in the Israeli government has. And so there probably is less resources put into, the PR efforts. I think that's number one. I think number two, Israel's at an inherent disadvantage because a picture speaks a million words. And in today's world, a video, which is even more powerful, it's very difficult when a picture or an image is shown to the world. And then Israel is now in the position of having to explain, which, by the way, that's one of the biggest criticisms we get of Hasbara. Hasbara, literally, hasbir means to explain, right? Once you're already explaining, you've already lost. You've already lost, right? Because that image is just seared in people's minds, and the videos are seared in people's minds. And so Israel's at, in some ways, an inherent disadvantage, because while it is true that they're doing everything they can, I believe, to not target or hurt innocent Palestinian civilians, the reality is many Palestinian civilians are getting hurt and killed because Hamas hides behind them, because of all the reasons we know that that Hamas and unfortunately not Hamas, other Palestinian terrorist organizations cynically, use people for these reasons, and that you have to explain that to people. And so, a image of a Palestinian child, we don't have to describe the images that probably everyone has seen. You can try to explain it, and it's very difficult. So I think Israel's has that inherent disadvantage. But I will say, thirdly, like I said, most Americans at least still support Israel. So yes, amongst young people, like all the things we said before, there are really areas of concern, but Anti-Israel sent of these propagandas, like I said, this has been going on for 45 years. This has been going on, since the 80s, certainly in the 2000s, and yet Americans still seem to be supporting Israel. So something still is working. The message is still, to some degree, getting through. But it's a disadvantage, and it's definitely something that is Israel losing that war, the PR war? Probably it is, but I think it's probably for those reasons just as much as they're just doing a bad job of it.
Have you found, Rabbi Mathias, that since October 7th, there has been a greater level of cooperation between different Jewish organizations, especially perhaps on campus? You have Aish, you have Maor, you have Hillel, you have Chabad. Has there been a difference and maybe an appreciation that we all have our niches and we all do wonderful things, but maybe we need to, or perhaps everyone was working very closely together beforehand and there's really been no difference?
I think that might be more difficult than defeating winning the PR war. It's a challenge. It's a challenge. I've been involved in the Jewish community for a long time. Everyone feels they've got their way and their way is the best way. And you have the challenge of funding and donors and needing to take credit for things. But there are pockets of working together. There are. And Aish, while we do a lot of our own programming, because we have our location right across from the Western Wall, because our presence online, where we have a lot of educational material, we do partner with a lot of organizations where we can be a resource for them. And we host groups all the time, from other organizations that, bring college students to Israel, and they use our facilities and they use our teachers, and they're teaching the classes and the curriculum that we've created. And so there are those partnerships and working together. But I think there has to be a lot more. And that's probably one of our biggest challenges, and but probably would be, a secret to to our success if we did it more.
Are there enough qualified Jewish educators in North America today? I mean, you're training students. Obviously, someone with the background, at least on the Israel side, has to be very qualified. But in terms of just qualified Jewish educators, is there a lack of them? And how do you get people more interested in that field?
It's maybe the number one, but certainly one of the number one issues. I mean, there's a lot of Jewish outreach organizations, like you said, Aish and Mayor and Olami. And I know of many places where it's not a lack of funds that there's not programming going on. It's because of lack of manpower and lack of quality manpower that are willing, to go and have that mysterious nefesh to, leave, the regular Jewish community and go out to a college campus or to a community that's a little bit further out and work with people. So there is a lack. I don't know the exact answer to it. It's not specifically what I've been mainly involved with, but I do know that there have been efforts at it. There's been organizations. There's Nir La'elef and Aish has had, leadership programs. But at the end of the day, it takes a combination of a person who has the skills to go out and really engage and with people who are less educated and less observant and less connected. And it's not just engaging with them. You're living in that environment, to go, to a college campus in the middle of nowhere and plop down with your family. I mean, this is one of the things Chabad does, which is just unbelievable. And so many people do it. I'm saying even outside the Chabad world, but not enough, because it's very, very challenging. And not only do you have to be committed to it, but your wife has to be committed to it, and you have to feel it's good for your family. And it's a big challenge of sort of going beyond where there are already Jewish communities, right? There's certain cities where you can be part of a community, do outreach, do education, but to go beyond that and go past it, it's a challenge. And the other challenge, by the way, and I've seen, because Aish, we've worked on campuses a lot, and we've had Aish staff being on different campuses from, Penn State University to Indiana University, like real campuses out there with you're talking about hours to the closest Jewish community. And even when you can find young couples that are willing to go there, so once their kids get to a certain age, and they want to start sending their kids to a school, they really can't stay. And so then what happens is, so let's say you even find someone who's dedicated. So they say, okay, well, they have a 4 or 5 year, say, maximum shelf life they can be there. Well, it takes them a year just to figure out what in the world, where they are, where they landed, how to navigate campus, who these students are, and then so by their second year, now you sort of figured it out. By the third year, you've really hit your group. By your fourth year, you've really built something, and then you leave. And now the next couple comes in, and it's hard to hand off relationships, and it's hard to hand off, what you built. And that new couple now sort of so we try different, staggering so that they can overlap for a year or 2 years, but there's challenges. It's a real challenge. And I think, what you're asking, that manpower, and are there enough educators, it's a huge issue. Just as big of an issue as funding, for what we're trying to do.
When you look at the American scene today, and you again alluded to this earlier, this cyclical nature of Jewish history, the ups, the downs, speaking of challenges, what are the greatest challenges facing American Jewry today? And what role do you see Aish HaTorah playing in the future to face those challenges?
To me, it's clear that the number one challenge is assimilation. Everything else is a byproduct of that. One of the things I started to see in my years with Hasbara Fellowships is that, like I said, a Jewish student who wants to stand up for Israel, who wants to be an advocate, who wants to be a leader, we could give them all the tools in the world and all the training and all the funding and all the support. The problem is that most of the students don't want to do that. It's not important to them. And that's just one symptom, right? There's others as well, of course, and intermarriage and, all the things that we're seeing. So the number one issue is assimilation. When the last Pew study that was done a couple of years ago, when, I don't remember the exact number, but I know, they asked Jews, what part of your Jewish identity is most important to you? And I think adherence to Jewish law was somewhere around 7 to 10%. Adherence to halacha. Having a good Jewish sense of humor was double that.
That's pretty important. That is pretty important.
I'm not against this good Jewish jokes.
Right.
But it paints a picture of where American Jewry is at. And it's unbelievable the amount of infrastructure that American Jewry has built, the amount of beautiful synagogues and the schools, and you can get all the kosher food in the world, and there's a mikvah in every community, and the Jewish federations and the JNF and every letter combination you could think of, right? There's a Jewish organization that's strong and is advocating and is offering services. If you are a Jew in America who wants to be connected, I mean, it's unbelievable. I tell college students all the time, take advantage now, man. You could go to Israel on a trip every 6 months if you want for free. There's people throwing, resources at you and all the free food you want. And the problem is the vast majority of Jews in America, they don't want it. It's not what they're looking for. They have not been given the appreciation that Judaism can be meaningful, can be relevant, can be inspiring, can bring value to their lives, can help their relationships, can help them have meaning in their careers, can help them deal with the issues that they're trying to have as parents, figuring out all the craziness of, the pandemic and the political situation, just creating, normalcy in their lives, that with the tools that Judaism has for them, it's just not on their radar. They just have not been shown that that's something that they can utilize. And so assimilation and a lack of Jewish identity and a lack of interest in Judaism is by far the number. It's the root cause of almost all the ailments that American Jewry has. And to answer your question, this is the mission of Aish. This is the mission of Aish. Reb Noach Weinberg started Aish, was my Rebbe, and he had a big vision. He had a vision about saving the Jewish people. That's what he would talk about. I once heard him say, and this might be a little controversial, but it just gives you a sense of who he was. He said, if I could makarev thousands of Jews to Judaism, to Torah, he said it'd be better if I just sat in Kollel. A lot of people in outreach care. What do you mean? So what he was trying to say is that, no, of course. Listen, I mentioned before I studied at Aish. I'm a Baal Tshuva. I have kids now. They're in yeshiva. Every world is it's and Rabbi Weinberg understood that, right? He wasn't, but what he was saying was it's not only just about how many people can we pull off the train to save, right? It's about how do we stop the trains from going? How do we turn the tide of the Jewish people that it becomes the in thing to want to become more connected to our Judaism, and that we have to figure out a way to get in those inroads of changing that idea. Like I said, that people, especially young people, see Judaism as relevant and meaningful, and so that's really what we've been focusing on a lot on social media, going into the whole worlds of TikTok, and I was just speaking to someone kidding. Aish's landmark seminar was the Discovery Seminar.
Absolutely.
Discovery Seminar, hundreds of thousands of people went through the Discovery Seminar. It started as a 5-day seminar, right? Can a rational person believe, right, that the Torah is divine, that God gave the Torah? And then it went into a 3-day seminar. And then it became a 1-day seminar. And then it became a big thing a few years ago. We turned it into a 3-hour seminar. People couldn't believe, how could we turn Discovery to it? Now we're putting Discovery in TikTok videos, right? Because that's where the generation's at. And we can either say, it's ridiculous, and these kids don't know anything, and it's or we could say, listen, this is where they're at. This is where they're getting their information. This is where they're sitting for hours a day. We have to be there. We have to be there to show them that Judaism can be relevant and meaningful. And that's what we're trying to do. And that's what Aish is about, is how can we change that momentum of the Jewish people to instead of going away from their Judaism, that we can turn it towards making Judaism relevant and meaningful for all Jews.
Are you optimistic, pessimistic, or somewhere in between, Rabbi Mathias? Obviously, you're optimistic. You wouldn't be doing this if you didn't believe that it could be done. But as you look at there's a sense that in a country like Israel, Israel is for all of its issues, it's a little shtetl. Israel, it's a shtetl, and Israel can turn around in one day. The whole country can turn around in one day. And you see signs of it here or there. America is this big entity, Jews all over the spectrum. It's a whole new model of, I could marry someone that's not Jewish, and I could belong to a synagogue, and my kids could be Jewish. It's a whole different ballgame. So just, in conclusion, optimistic, pessimistic, somewhere in between.
Yeah. Listen, we have big challenges, and every day and every year that time passes is becoming harder, and Jews are moving further away, and like you said, it's like just the image that I got when you said it's almost like they're going into the quicksand, of non-Jewish culture and non-Jewish thought, and we're losing them, and it's hard not to be pessimistic. I'm not going to profess that I'm a big Baal Emunah, but again, Rabbi Weinberg, who was my Rebbe, he would pound us over the head. You know what? If Kadosh Baruch Hu wants it to happen, is there anything that we can't do? And the more we understand it is a Kadosh Baruch Hu, it's not us. We can't accomplish anything. All we can do is put in our effort, put in our Mesiras Nefesh, and believe, this is the right thing to do. And this is what a Kadosh Baruch Hu wants. He wants to bring back his children. It's the most obvious thing, right? If a parent has their child, God forbid, drowning, right? They'll do anything in the world to save their child. The Kadosh Baruch Hu wants to save his children. We just have to, do what we can to help make that happen, Al Pi Teva. And so that's the main place where my optimism comes from, is that I believe this is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants. It's the right thing, and we got to just keep doing all of our efforts to make it happen.
Rabbi Mathias, thank you so much for your insights, inspiration, and together with the whole Aish HaTorah organization, you should continue to go from strength to strength, from chayil to chayil. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Man, thank you for having me, Ari. Thank you so much.